Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about how to make best use of the 3D print files that are available on the internet. There will be 4 sections. The first will be about how to search for and download files. The second part will discuss how to check and repair print files. The third part will be about rescaling and editing to print files to obtain better results, and the last part will discuss how to remix files to produce a completely different model. If you're planning to buy a 3D printer for the first time, the current recommendation is to get the Bambu Labs A1. It's not the cheapest model available at around £330 at December 2024 prices, but it's very well made, easy to set up and produces good results. Some of the cheaper models are notorious for needing constant fiddling with to achieve acceptable results. Searching for 3D print files. The first thing to say is that there is little or no quality control on the internet, so be prepared firstly to work through pages of irrelevant rubbish, and secondly, even if you do find what looks to be a useful file, there is no guarantee that it will be printable. So, what sort of things can you download and print? The answer is anything from useful little workshop tools like speed squares, miser blocks and drill guides to a complete 3D printable radio controlled railway. The best place to start is probably Yagi. This is a search engine for 3D printable files. More specific search terms yield slightly better results. There are a few prolific content creators, as you can tell by the number of visually similar results. If you find a model that looks particularly promising, click on it to open the file's host site and then click on the creator's name. In this case, the GWR bench was created by Jonathan Duffett, username Iron Mink. He currently has 140 good quality, mainly railway related designs. Iron Mink's offerings include a number of wagons, particularly engineers' wagons that are not currently available to O-gauge modelers. The thing to watch out for is content created for simulation games. These are typically low poly models not suited for 3D printing. The details are created by adding graphic files to the base model. This Wimbury Forest of Dean coal wagon is just a plain box on an underframe that was clearly intended for a completely different wagon. On the other hand, there are very many models intended for tabletop gaming. They capture the feel of the prototype very well, but because they are designed to be handled frequently, the details are rudimentary. This K2 Austin lorry would need a lot of editing to create a satisfactory O-gauge model. In contrast, for those looking for an early 1950s coal lorry, this Vulcan, although intended for a 1:148 scale, is well detailed and would not need much modification to create a very decent model. Once you have located and downloaded your file, you will need to check that it is printable and drawn to the correct scale. The slicer program that comes bundled with your printer is the best place to start. Open your file and the slicer will check that it is manifold. That is, the surface geometry completely encloses the volume with no gaps or holes. In the case of this file, a coil P created by Iron Mink. A message in the bottom right hand corner reports that no errors were found. If errors are found, the slicer will attempt a repair, not always successfully. We now have a manifold object, drawn to scale but still not ready to print. If we examine it closely, we can see that it is lacking in some important details such as rivets and individual springs. How to add details will be discussed in part 3. Some downloaded files are so poor that they are unrepairable by conventional means. Autodesk Mesh Mixer is a free program for editing and repairing 3D files. It includes an inspector that identifies faults by adding coloured pointers and an auto repair function. In the case of this wheeled excavator, Mesh Mixer has found so many errors that the auto repair function deletes virtually the entire model. Equally, there are plenty of excellent 3D designs that can be printed without difficulty. These include smaller ceiling items such as crates, barrels, pallets, electrical cabinets, doors and windows, and even quite large items such as the LMS container shown here. These were not all originally intended for model railways, and it is worth exploring the online worlds of tabletop gaming, military modelling, 1:43 scale slot car racing and radio controlled modelling for useful items. Be scaled and edited. Most of the small scenic items in the last segment were intended for scales other than O scale and need to be resized either in your slicer program or your 3D design program. The only limitations being whether or not the accuracy and level of detail is sufficient for your needs. Most 3D design programs allow the insertion of reference images. These can be used to check the accuracy of a model, as in the case of this diagram 2/733 Weld Troll drawn by Iron Mink. If you have not already done so, it is worth running off a test print to check your printer's ability to deal with smaller details such as rivet heads and gussets. On my Prusa Mark III's, this showed that the smallest dome rivet that will print reliably was about 0.86mm in diameter, and that cylinders of a similar size were liable to break off. The Weld Troll is a good representation of an unusual prototype, but there is scope for further improvements. Firstly, beveling the rivets will both improve the appearance and make an easier to print model. Secondly, the tie-down rings will be too weak to be useful and better replaced with brass wire and split pins. Thirdly, the suspension units will look better with the individual spring leaves, pigtails and the hole in the back opened out to take brass axle bearings. More advanced modellers might also want to introduce some form of springing to the chassis. Lastly, the wagon would be tricky to print in one piece on most 3D printers and would thus need to be split up into smaller sections. How you go about modifying the Weld Troll will depend on which 3D design program you use. In Blender 4.2, rounding the rivets is a question of selecting the top edge of each rivet and applying a bevel to create a hemisphere. Removing the tie-down rings will involve a Boolean subtraction process and then inserting holes to take the split pins. The next step after super detailing a 3D model is to kit bash it into a different model altogether. The classic transport truck by Razor Orlear is a pretty accurate 1:36 scale model of a 1980s Fuso Canter with a typical South Asian high-sided body. This is a very well conceived design, maximised for 3D printing and even featuring working Ackerman steering. This particular Canter was built in some quantity in Belgium, and a few could have made their way to Great Britain. In any case, the overall style is typical of many small lorries of this era. Converting it to a skip lorry for the scrap dealer on my small shunting layout first of all involved rescaling all the components to 1:43.5. The high-sided body was cut down, leaving just the floor, and the lifting arms and other additional items drawn up in Blender. The scrap skip is one of many available on the internet. This was a simple and effective conversion. So there you have it. Equipped with a 3D printer, a 3D design program and an internet connection, the world is your oyster. You will be able to download and print many items useful to all aspects of rowing modelling and use these files as the basis for designs created by yourself. I should add that all of the 3D designs featured in this presentation are free downloads, and that Blender, my preferred 3D design program, is also a free download. Apart from the financial saving, the open source programs such as Blender and FreeCAD have the advantage of a large community of volunteers who regularly post tutorial videos on YouTube.